Okay, so I realize I was not invited here to provide my scientific input to the conference, but I knew I'd be speaking to an audience that included quite a few scientists, and that it intimidated me a little bit, so I worked really, really hard on my abstract. It's the first abstract I've ever written in my life. I'm like a history major in college, so and I had several people read it very carefully to make sure it met scientific muster. One of the things that I did, though, was kind of look at the titles of other sciencey like abstracts, and to try to understand what they're supposed to do. And I got the impression that they have to do three things. They have to be very dull, very long, and explain everything that you're going to say in your presentation. So there it is. I think I did good. It is by far the longest title of a presentation I've ever had. This is what I would have really titled it if I wasn't afraid of what you would think. Is farming legal in California? So the policy history is complicated, so I'm going to boil it down very, very quickly for you. In 1969, the state of California passed, through its state legislature, the Porter-Cologne Law. That led to the formation of the State Water Resources Control Board, which we have representatives of right here in the room, as well as 9 regional boards. You just heard from one of them. And this law gave unprecedented authority to these boards to do a very, very big job. They were in charge of protecting water, surface water, groundwater, wetlands, non-point sources, and regulating non-point sources and point sources. So it's quite a big job. And the way they do that is each regional board establishes water quality control plans. They identify the beneficial uses of the water bodies that are in their jurisdiction, set water quality objectives for each of those uses, and those are presumed in groundwater to include drinking, and they use the water quality objective 10 milligrams per liter of nitrate as nitrogen as the goal, which of course was adopted by the US EPA in 1995. But the sort of controversial question is, where does that apply? Clearly it applies at the tap, but does it apply in first encounter groundwater? According to the state, it does, and so that's where growers are regulated, at first encounter groundwater. So that, to me, given the amounts of the types of crops we grow these days, the amount of nitrogen that we apply to crops, and particularly with dairies, the amount of nitrogen that's applied, makes for a very difficult situation. It's a little bit like trying to hold a rock concert right next door to an old folks home and expect that it's all going to work out. It's not. And that's the situation we're in today. And dairy makes it even more difficult in a way because cow manure is problematic. There's no label on the side that says, here's how much nitrogen you have in it. It ends up being stored in a solid and liquid form. They both act differently, and they're both highly variable. You have a high amount of organic nitrogen. So the difficulty that all farmers face of getting the right amount of nitrogen to the plant when they need it is even more difficult with dairy manure because it's mineralizing as it's being applied and used. And so you may apply it at the right time in the right amount, but then it's not available to the plant. And so that all makes it quite tricky. So I stole a slide from a real scientist. That's the next one. Marcia, she presented this yesterday. Thank you, if you're here, Marcia, for loaning me the slide. She showed us that it's possible to get better. At the left, you'll see a kind of a blue line there, and that's the nitrates that were being measured in a series of monitoring wells under 5 dairies back between 1998 and 2004. So you see numbers as high as 140. That's pretty scary. Over time, she was able to get the numbers down to around 30, which is still 3 times the drinking water standard. Again, this is not in a drinking water well. It's in a monitoring well right below the surface. But as she got better and better, she got to a point where the yield started to drop off, and they had to abandon ship. I think this is still, though, it shows that progress can be made. We probably need a refined approach, and that's the thing that we're kind of working on now. It's not just the overall amount that you apply, it's that timing, it's understanding the mineralization calculations. I think those things can be resolved, and that will get further improvement. It's not clear if we'll get enough improvement from just doing that to get to the drinking water standard, and we may need to consider other options. Those could include things like exporting more of our solid manure off dairy so that we have even less organic nitrogen to deal with. Or we're looking at technologies at both the state and national level to transform manure a bit to make it act more like fertilizer, or the fertilizer that we can buy. So it's a difficult thing that's in front of us, and since the time that the work in that slide was done, a lot has happened. We adopted in the Central Valley what I would consider the strictest dairy regulations in the world for reducing nitrate impacts from dairies. We've been living with those for a few years now. I think some improvement has happened. It's not cheap. We think our dairies spend between $20 and $36 million a year complying with these regulations. And the industry has invested a significant amount in things like monitoring and outreach and education, additional research. We think we have the most extensive monitoring effort for dairies anywhere. Till Ongerman presented on that a little bit yesterday. But we're monitoring 42 dairies. We have about 440 wells, and we take samples every month. And we are going to continue a significant investment in research. But the problem is that even with all of that, we still aren't in compliance. We have, and as a result, the government's options, as I outlined to you earlier, when you're not in compliance, they're somewhat limited. Option one is they can prohibit the discharge. And that is essentially a death sentence for a dairy. If you have no place to put your manure and you can't grow a crop, you can't do business. So prohibiting the discharge doesn't work well. Option two, under the current regulations, is they give you a little time and then they prohibit the discharge. And you can guess that also is not a terribly workable solution. So what are we going to do about that? Well, there's some potential policy options here. We need them. We need policy options that will allow farming to be compliant with the law, that will reduce liability. Lawsuits are starting to proliferate against farmers. We need to be able to provide access to all for safe drinking water for safe drinking water. We've seen just in the last presentation how important that is. And we need to ensure that we're making continued improvement and progress towards restoring the aquifers. There are potential policy options being actively considered right now. The legislature is looking at the possibility of redefining compliance and liability for situations when everything else is being complied with, but the nitrate objectives are being exceeded. There would be conditions with this. The State Water Board is looking at its, and has been for several years now, looking at its groundwater and looking at developing a groundwater policy and revisiting its anti-degradation policy, either changing the policy or changing the way it's implemented. And the Regional Water Quality Control Board, particularly in the Central Valley, is through a process called CV Salts, is looking at ways to permit agriculture by making changes in its water quality control plan that would allow agriculture and livestock operations to discharge even when it's not reasonable or feasible to meet water quality objectives for nitrate or salt. This cannot and should not be a get-out-of-jail-free card. But I would say there's a few things we have to think about. The first is this is a big situation that was created over many years. We created it together as a society, and we need to address it the same way. it has to be implicit in the discussion that access to safe drinking water is the first and foremost thing that we resolve. Environmental justice communities must be part of the discussion or it won't work. And commitment to reasonable progress by all dischargers is essential for this type of policy approach to work. So, as the great Karen Ross, our Secretary of Food and Agriculture, once said on Tuesday, about 2 days ago in this hotel, one of the most important sciences to be involved in this is the social sciences. And she also said top-down doesn't work as well as partnering with landowners. And I would agree with that. We've been asking ourselves at this conference, how do we engage the farmers? And it's going to vary, you know, particularly between countries, between regions. They're going to take different combinations of education, incentives, and governance to get this done. But I would suggest we do follow her advice. And, you know, if I can get on my soapbox for just a minute without disrespecting the other folks, I want to say we need to respect farmers for what they do. We didn't get to this situation just, the farmers didn't get there by themselves. They've been following the recommendations of experts for many years, from their universities, from their cooperative extensions, private sector, seed companies, crop fertilization, fertilizer companies, irrigation and fertilization specialists. We've all enjoyed what they've done for us. The food and the fiber that they give us, the jobs on the farms, food processing and marketing, transportation, and the many support sectors that go with those. So now is not the time to point a finger of blame, branding them as polluters, litigating or regulating them out of existence. It's time for us to all work together to move the process forward and make sure we all get our needs met. I also want to say that even if we are able to create policy options that allow farming to continue in California while we make progress on the water and water quality protection, how we actually regulate farmers is important too. Command and control approach has limited value. I didn't say it has no value. I didn't say regulation, because a lot of times people hear me, they think, oh, he's against regulation. No, it has to be part of it. What I am saying, though, is that the regulators that we have today don't have the time or the expertise to manage farms or teach farmers how to do that. Their role should be to encourage the process, and that process is what's going to answer the challenge. We need a much greater education effort and a much greater awareness of the issue and how to deal with it and the solutions that farmers can use. So, as a final note, I'd say this is a very difficult problem. Dairies are economically challenged in California today. They're losing a lot of money right now, so it's a tough time for them. Hopefully that gets better. But they do feel overburdened by regulations that they feel are coming too fast at them and asking them for too much. And we recognize, though, that for others the progress isn't coming fast enough. They've been too long without the water situation being solved. So we've got a daunting challenge between us. And sometimes I ask myself and others ask me, how are you not depressed all the time about this? And I think there's two things that make me optimistic. I remember how far we've come, and this picture is an example of how far our industry can come in not too many years. And then when I'm in conferences like this, I'm reminded of just the awesome brain power that is being focused on these issues, and indeed the kind of the human spirit that is being focused on these problems, and that so many are devoted to. And when I realize that, I know that progress is inevitable. Thank you.
Thank you, JP. So, questions?
Yeah. Thank you for your presentation. You said in your presentation that farmers followed the advice of the Extension Service. Is it really the case that farmers did not apply more animal manure and was necessary from a point of view of the amount of phosphorus and nitrogen and potassium which the crop needed?
That's a fair question. I'm very sure that farmers don't always do exactly what they're advised to do in a perfect way. My comment was really intended more on the macro development of agriculture. The agriculture that we see today was not developed by one farmer. Everyone's doing things pretty much the same way across California dairies. That wasn't invented entirely by the dairies. It was invented by the support system that they developed, or that was developed, and so I'd say in general, these forces have steered the industry in a direction for very good reasons, but that we need to change that and if we're going to change the way that farms in general are performing. But it wasn't meant to be a commentary that people are exactly following the advice of every academic that has come across them.
Just to comment, I come from a country where we had a similar situation, and at that moment, because we have a lot of animals, the animal manure was a waste and not a fertilizer, so they had to get rid of it. And now the regulations are in place, and then they just apply what is needed for the crop.
Absolutely.
Other questions? Did I miss one? He's oh, sorry. Okay. Sorry.
So you did mention technology, and like Marcia pointed out, the problem of reducing yields. Do you have much hope for technology improving how manure is used as a fertilizer, or is that just too expensive a road to go down?
Well, it can be. I think we have to. This is my favorite topic, so somebody tell me to shut up when we run out of time. But I think if we approach it in a combination as part of a combination of strategies, that technology can be very helpful. For example, if we can remove more of the solids that are currently entering animal waste lagoons, we could have some wonderful environmental benefits and agronomic benefits, I believe. For example, if the type of nitrogen that's in the lagoon is more plant available and less organic, and there is less solids in that lagoon, then I think we open up ourselves to a world of possibilities that includes less methane being emitted from the lagoon, less nitrate leaching from the lagoon, and more irrigation options. Remember from Till Angerman's presentation yesterday, something like 95 to 98% of the nitrate footprint on a dairy is from the croplands, not the lagoons. So if we can start using the water that's coming out of lagoons more like chemical fertilizer, apply it more evenly. Right now it doesn't, as Marcia pointed out to us yesterday, in its current form, it doesn't work well with pressurized systems or drip systems or anything like that. So I do think there are some things out there that we're looking at very actively in the industry that could be game changers. None of them by themselves will do it. I think with the existing technology we have today, we can do a better job. That's what Till's trying to do, is to maximize the strategies, make folks understand and follow advice, but to follow it as a system and not just do one thing, but to understand really the bigger picture of what they're doing. So yeah, I have a lot of hope for technology as being part of it, but we can't turn our brains off. There's no button we can push that's going to make it happen. You've got to manage it.